It looks to be you.
Hey, Brian, can you hear me? You think
Yes,
it's me?
I can. But your video is frozen. Can you hear me?
Well, hello. We don't know. We're just playing here. This is WeatherBrains 463 for December 8th. This is the pre-show where we hopefully get
Screw
all
up.
the bugs worked out. Boy, that never happens. But apparently we have a big bug in that everybody's video is frozen and we have delays going on here. Let me drop this thing and I'm going to rejoin it. So stand by. Stand by. I'll be back.
He'll be back. Hey there, Rick Smith. I thought you weren't going to be here tonight.
I am here tonight.
Well, good.
Last week I wasn't.
Well, I know you weren't last year. Last week, whatever.
Rick, you wouldn't believe the fog that has developed here.
I was just. Well, I saw a tweet about that a minute ago. How that it's getting foggy again.
Let me put up the tower cam that I just. There, it's in the chat. You won't. It's so thin. It's razor thin. But it's down. The visibility is down below 1/10 of a mile.
Wow.
Oh, that is razor thin.
You see that's a tower sticking out on the right.
Yeah, I see that.
All those little pools of light are street lights and businesses around the TV station.
Ooh, that's really ethereal and spooky.
Wow.
That's cool.
It's.
I think everybody's had their fill of clouds and fog. I know you guys need moisture down there, but it's a little gloomy after a while.
Rick, you've gone south completely.
Uh-oh. Let's see.
Now we have 2 James spans. Oh, now we have 1 James span. And it's still frozen. No, we have 2 James spans. This is a well-oiled machine. I'll just talk to myself.
It's oiled. I don't know about well.
Yeah, I think it was lubricated with Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
I may not make it tonight.
I'm back. You ever seen this any better?
Nope. Same as your. That's how you sound.
That's how I always sound. So, all right.
I guess you'll have to be quiet for this episode.
Yeah. I'll just do hand signals. Hold up.
Hold up signs.
What if I wrote these on pieces of cardboard and held them up? Never work.
Well, James can't seem to find any bandwidth either, so I guess maybe the fog in Wichita Falls is sucking all the bandwidth out of Norman.
It could be.
Hey, Rick, I don't know if you heard when I came on. I'm ecstatic. My daughter and I are going to the Oregon FSU game.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm crazy to go.
That's the Rose Bowl?
Yes. January 1st at 2 p.m. I'll be in the Rose Bowl in an end zone seat.
It's all in the Rose Bowl. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's about all I can afford. I don't even know if I may have to camp out with the homeless. I can't find a hotel.
I can imagine.
Man, this fog is unbelievable.
Do they have out a dense fog advisory?
They said they're working on it in the chat. It's very localized.
Okay. So Charter is cranking out about 56K on the bandwidth, down and up.
Ouch! It's supposed to be what, 50 megs?
Yeah.
Some days you want
So,
to talk about small town, James.
yeah.
Some days in this building on Wi-Fi on my MacBook Air, I've gotten over 156 meg up and down.
Holy
Wow.
mackerel! Whoa!
Wow.
Now that's a pipe.
Goodness gracious.
I'm at 50 now. Or it's been over 150. I'm at 50 something right now.
No, Charter just I went and restarted the modem from scratch, and it's just not happening. So I am on the in-house network, which can offer some interesting anomalies, but we'll just see what happens. All right, let's invite our guests here.
Did you see look at my Twitter feed, James? Look at the fog here. This is from our tower cam, this picture.
Ooh, that's cool.
It's razor thin.
Wow.
On
That's
the lights on the right are a tower down the road, and this camera is about 600 feet up.
Wow.
It's going to make a killer time lapse. I'm looping it right now, or recording it.
All right, well, let me welcome everybody on the YouTube channel here. This is WeatherBrains episode 463 for the 8th of December. Apologize for my lack of being here. I assume you guys were sharing boring personal stories and humorous anecdotes, which is what you're supposed to be doing here.
We couldn't.
Yes.
We couldn't see each other because of the fog here in Wichita Falls.
Well, James, we've never had a Skycam shot like that one.
No. By the way, since Kevin's got fog, I'm going to blow the you-know-what.
Wait. Oh, my God.
Oh, there we go.
There
Nice
you go.
job.
That'll clear it out.
Let me put you on our air so you can have that.
Yeah, exactly. So let me invite our guests here. I think they're having a conniption.
So what's Bill Murray doing? Is he off someplace spectacular?
I don't know. He just said he's out.
Is my audio any better now?
Uh-oh.
Nope.
Hey, Rick, your audio's funky.
It's really funky. I mean, it's staying really funky.
Wow.
It's really funky. And how would I best describe that audio?
Really funky.
Really funky. And let's invite one more. How come everybody has a cool-looking profile picture but me? I just look like a bonehead. Everybody's got these, glamour shots. I mean, mine just looks. Ugh. This is my Google Plus picture. So
Well,
there.
you chose it.
Well, yeah, but I need a glamour shot. I mean, somebody needs to come in here and do a glamour shot. Brian, I think you should do me a glamour shot.
I'll be glad to do you.
Please. Like Aubrey, her, the one she's got. I mean, kind of got that head off to the side. I mean, you can tell a professional did it. I mean, and I'm over here doing. Kate, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Wow, you look like John Oldshoe's wife. This is like really, you have a double.
That's what I thought when I saw her picture. I thought it was John Oldshoe.
You just look like John Oldshoe, and you have no idea who we're talking about. He's a weather guy here.
Good or bad?
No, it's great.
Good.
She's brilliant. I mean, she's. They live in Mobile, Alabama. But that's awesome. Wow. Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to.
Can you hear me okay without my headset on?
You sound fine. And I don't think we're hearing ourselves coming. The only issue is if we feed back through your channel, but I don't hear it, so I think we're okay. Let's see if Gary can hear us. Gary.
This is Gary. I can hear you.
Got you loud and clear. We just see your picture. We're not seeing any video, but
okay. Hold on then.
and I remind everybody this is a core audio show. We ported the show to video, but most people still listen. So if we don't have video, it's okay. But there are a shocking number of people that do watch, and many watch live, which is even more shocking. People are watching now, and we're not even started yet.
You had one of my high school classmates on last week. How's that for coincidence?
Wow. Which one?
Joe Rankin.
Cool. That's awesome. Now, he was great. Let's see. Kevin, did we lose you? Are you okay?
I'm here. I'm just trying to catch up to my work here.
Okay. Your head is so still. It looks like you're frozen, but you're moving. Let's see if we got Rick. So we got
How's this?
good.
There we go.
That way I know that you're working. Let's see. Rick has an audio issue. Your video looks
Is
good.
it any better? Check. 1, 2, 3.
No, it's just as bad.
Try and drop your video quality down, Rick, and maybe it'll favor the audio.
But your video looks so clean. I don't think it's a bandwidth problem. Say something.
Yeah,
No.
That's 1, 2, 3.
that is a little Cylonish. Maybe you need to unplug your mic and plug it back in.
Okay, now let me keep working.
We've never had audio issues with Rick before. That's interesting.
Oh, it was a first. How's my audio?
Yours is clean.
Good.
We have 2 Garys now.
And a giggler.
And a giggler and Nate.
Okay.
You know, I wish I could. I need to go sit in one of Nate's classes one time.
We
Would
could
love
probably
to
both learn a lot.
Audit the class.
You show up for that class, I'm going to make you teach it.
No, I would love to learn from you, the master.
We actually used your the keynote that you gave at AMS Broadcast in Nashville. That was one of the required readings of the class.
Uh-oh.
Bucket of spilled paint and everything.
Oh, boy. You know,
All right.
all the things you say come back to haunt you later in life. I learned that. So I think we're all here. Let's see. Gary, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. I'm surprised. I tested this with Nate the other day, and it worked, so I don't know why you're not getting a video this time around.
Audio sounds fine. We're just not. And again, if we don't get the video, it's okay, and that most people do listen.
Yeah.
So we're down to Gary's video and Rick's audio.
Is this audio any better?
Oh, yes. Clean as a
Switch
whistle.
to the emergency backup iPad method here. So
Oh my!
You're clean as a whistle now, so you're good.
good.
Let's see. We're about to hit the cable television audience here. As soon as I see them come up, we'll start the show. I've never had to wait on the cable TV, but we've always been so late getting these things started. This is like a shock. And I actually did a 7 o'clock speech tonight, Brian, at the Pelham Civic Center.
Wow.
I had that problem where I ran it too close one time, but this was, the next exit down. And they promised they would accommodate me. I would walk in there at 7. I'd do the talk. I would be through at 7:45, and they honored it beautifully. It got out at 7:45, and I walked in here at like 7:55, so that worked out great.
Oh,
When
that's
you're
fabulous.
James Spann, they have to honor your requests.
Oh yeah. Green only M&Ms in the green room, please. And again, I am on, for those that join late, I am on the not the typical internet pipe. I'm on the station in-house internet, which in theory should be a big pipe, but I hope it is. The one I typically use for some reason is not working well.
Nate, look at the Twitter feed. Look at the fog on the Twitter feed. We're down below 1/10 of a mile here, but it's razor thin.
Nice. And my machine is doing everything it can just to keep up with the video, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the beast. But I'm getting a new one here in the next couple of weeks. Brian, you have anything I should avoid? Otherwise, I'm looking at a MacBook Pro 15-inch maxed out drive and RAM.
No, that sounds good.
Okay.
Mine is 2.5 years old now, but I see no reason to change. I mean, I have
Mine's older than that.
solid state drive, 16 gigs of memory.
Mine is 7 years old, and while I did upgrade to the solid state drive, doing the Google Hangout is all it can do at any one time. So I can't have Twitter up, for example, and have it be streaming it. It would die. It would gag and die.
Wow. Well, this is a mid 2012 Retina, so this is 2.5 years old, and it's great.
It's
I
still
see
a good machine, though.
It is. This is just marvelous. It's just
James?
getting good. Hello.
Do you know that my first MacBook Pro, which I bought when I retired from the Weather Service 11 years ago, is still working? I sold it to someone, and they're still a friend of mine, and it's still operating perfectly.
Isn't that kind of like you sell your used car to somebody and then you see it driving around town?
Yeah.
My wife's car that she had during most of college was a Buick LeSabre, a '95 amethyst, sort of a purplish color, but that particular model year had really terrible paint, and so the roof is all rusted out, or it looks kind of rusted out and everything. And every now and again, whoever bought it uses it to deliver pizzas. And so we'll see it around from time to time delivering pizza. But it's really cool because it still runs, and you had a couple 100,000 miles on it when we sold it. And did well. My car that I sold not long after that one was totaled. I sold it to a daughter of a guy at our church, and she had parked it out on the street in front of her apartment. Some drunk driver hit it at 3 a.m. and ran. And then blamed when the cops found her car, or this person's car, she blamed the other girl who owned my car in spite of the fact that her car was parked and she was in her apartment asleep at the time. So cops saw right through that. But
Wow. Hey, Kate, do you prefer, Catherine or Kate?
Colloquially, I'm Kate, but I publish under Catherine, so I think it doesn't actually matter.
Well, Nate is going to be in charge of this interview, so if anything goes wrong, blame him. He's the other bald guy.
I can't believe his avatar is actually Grumpy Cat. That's fantastic.
Gotta love it.
Let's see, Gary, your audio's good, right? You can hear us.
I can hear everything. I'm trying different settings here, but I'm not having any luck with regards to getting to the video. I can see myself. If I open up a window on my own webcam software, I can see myself on the webcam, but for some reason here in Google Plus, it's coming up with my profile photo.
Okay, well, there's the settings thing up there, and that's all I can tell you. That's all I know to do in the Hangouts.
Yeah, in the settings, I'm there, and for some reason, the Logitech, the webcam I'm using is dimmed out. I can have some control with the microphone and the speaker, but not the webcam. So. This is new for me, so yeah, I'm making a newbie mistake here somehow. I'm
actually using one of those Logitech webcams. Mine is let me see what the number is, a C920. I've always used this little internal camera, but I just decided to try this and see if it works any better. All right, let's get this thing started because
I think it looks ugly on your MacBook Pro.
You really hurt my feelings.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh, great.
I'm the one who gave you the heads up on the live shot tomorrow, last Friday.
That's true. So somebody's already done a screen grab on the pre-show. Let's put it out on Twitter. Wow. So I just went away. Did that happen to you guys?
Yeah, yes.
I got knocked off.
I got knocked off too. It said a server error. Wow.
Interesting.
And your picture isn't as good as it was.
We are off to a bumpy start here, ladies and gentlemen.
So the show is typical. That's what you're telling everybody.
We still have almost 100 people watching here, which is really creepy.
Thanks for the stats, by the way.
Okay. Now, this is just really strange. So let me put my little toolbox back up here. I think everybody else is back. Goodness. We have bandwidth problems. Looks like Google Hangout had an issue. I think that was a Google issue and not an issue here.
That was...
That bumped everybody. All
right.
Let's go back and try this thing one more time before it blows up. Record track 1, record track number 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, come on now. Come on. It is the season. 'Tis the season to play a little Christmas music. It's WeatherBrains episode number 463. for December 8th, 2014. It's the weekly show all about weather for weather weenies, geeks, dweebs, nerds, and dorks.
and those too.
Yeah. Let me just warn everybody here that we have been plagued already with issues with bandwidth and with the Hangout platform we use. So if this whole show goes right down the tubes, you know why. But we're going to make it work somehow. My name is James Spann, and we've got some of the regulars that are away this week, and let me just kind of call them out first. Bill Murray is somewhere in La La Land. He's on one of his mysterious trips. We don't know where he is, but Bill is out tonight. We know where Dr. John is, and I admire Dr. John. You know, he just said, I want to watch the Packers game. You know, instead of beating around the bush with, well, I've got to, I've got to peer review a paper for the Journal of Applied Meteorology. No, he just said that I want to watch the Packers because they're on Monday Night Football. We do the shows on Monday night, and they're playing the Falcons at Lambeau Field. So Dr. John is wearing his cheesehead hat, watching the Falcons and the Packers. The last time I checked over there, it was like 7-7. So, and I saw some snow falling at Lambeau Field. So a great night for football there. But Dr. John is out. But we do have the internationally beloved meteorologist who is happy. He's a very happy man.
I am not a grumpy old weather geek tonight. I'm just an old weather geek, but I'm a happy weather geek. My team made it to the national playoffs.
Why are you happy?
I'm going to go see them. Yes, Pasadena, here I come.
You know, I told Brian they do make decaffeinated drinks, and they're really good. He should try them sometime. So you're a Florida State Seminole, and the Florida State Seminoles are going to play Oregon, the Ducks.
Yes.
And so you're winging your way to Pasadena, California.
Yes.
Winging.
I'm going to be winging via Southwest Airlines, my favorite airline, and the cheap one.
Product placement. He's getting it for free.
Yes. No, I'm not. I wished I was. I am using my points, though.
So when is this game, Brian? Is this? I assume it's in January sometime.
January the 1st. I will not be here for the December 29th WeatherBrains show, or whatever one we do that week.
Do it from Los Angeles. Come on. I mean,
if I've arrived by then, I don't know if I will have arrived by then or not.
Oh, Brian Peters, you have arrived.
Yeah,
wherever you are, you have arrived, sir.
When you're a regular on this show, you have arrived. You are a kingpin in the weather business.
At El Patron tonight, when we had the Spanish dinner or Mexican dinner, a person pointed out that I might actually get to see 2 Heisman Trophy winners because Jameis Winston, the quarterback at Florida State, won last year, and they think the Oregon guy is going to win this year.
So what's up with Florida State? These guys get behind every game in the first half, and they come back and win at the last second. That doesn't bode well for Oregon.
I know.
Scores 50 points a half.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Oregon's going to score 50 points.
Oh,
I think our defense is going to be better than that.
I think Florida State's going to be down 49-0 at the half,
and win 52-49.
Still win.
Yeah, and win like 67-65 or something like that. So anyway, we also have Kevin Selly, who is not at his post. He was there just a second ago.
Fog-bound.
He's fighting fog. He's a fog chaser.
Fog chasing.
I'm going to make my pick of the week my Twitter feed. I'll find the link to this exact post. But this is the most amazing fog I've ever seen. It rolled in really quickly, but visibility's down to a tenth of a mile or less. I had one guy call in, a weather watcher, estimated his visibility was 100 yards or less, but it is razor thin. So we have a tower camera 600 feet up on our tower, and you can just see these little pools of light being created by the businesses that are around the television station, and it's really cool.
So are you demanding to our associate Rick Smith that he issue a dense fog advisory?
He's already done that. I'm a little concerned.
Took care of that.
He hasn't gotten me my upper air sight yet, though.
That takes more than a week or two.
The advisory is more important than the upper air sight.
Yeah, Kevin.
Well, perhaps
it's an upgrade from never mind. That's a different show.
Okay. All right. I'll be patient. So you think by Thursday, maybe?
Of this week? No.
Yeah.
Thursday of next year? Sometime,
Don't hold your breath, is what you're saying.
And for those that don't know, Kevin is in Wichita Falls, Texas, part of the Oklahoma or Norman County warning area. Rick Smith is the warning coordination meteorologist there for the National Weather Service. And Rick, how are you, sir?
I am doing very well. We got to see the sun today for the first time in 100 and some odd hours. I don't know. It seems like it's been foggy and low clouds for weeks, but got to see the sun. I guess you got to see it a little bit down in Wichita Falls before the fog rolled back in, but doing very well. Our football team didn't fare as well as yours, you know, Alabama and Florida State, but you know,
you can root for us.
Things are, yeah, I haven't quite decided how that's going to work out yet, but
oh, come on, Rick.
Anyway,
us WCMs have got to stay together. Go Noles.
I know far more Florida State people than I know.
See, there's a good excuse right there. Plus, I'll be cheering for you in Pasadena.
So what happened? What happened to the Sooners, Rick, playing Oklahoma State? I was shocked at that. What happened?
It was a cold, foggy night in Norman, and
blame it on the weather.
Blame the
weather. There were some
weather.
bad decisions made in the last 60 seconds of the game, and you know, Oklahoma State's got a player that can just run like the wind, and he ran like the wind and ran a punt all the way back for a touchdown, tied the game, and we went into overtime and missed a field goal, and they didn't miss theirs. So it was, but you know, the crowd left when they thought the game was over, and those that stayed were treated. So it was, you know, better luck next time.
Okay, cool. Well, Nate Johnson is going to kind of take Bill Murray's place. So Nate, I'll let you bring in our guests. Go.
All right. So this is.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Aubrey is missing. Aubrey is having to work the morning shift. I apologize. So she is out tonight. So go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So this, I think, might have been the second episode of WeatherBrains that was completely organized a few weeks ago after a certain book came out, and I will hold this book up here. The book is called 9 Days Inside Hurricane Sandy Superstorm, or Superstorm 9 Days Inside Hurricane Sandy. The superstorm comes first, but you know, I put it at the top. Anyway, the author is an award-winning science writer and a PhD, by the way, Dr. Catherine Miles, or Kate, as she goes by colloquially, as she says. Her essays have appeared in many places, including the New York Times, Popular Mechanics. She has a PhD from the University of Delaware, Go Fighting Hens, and is a faculty member for the graduate program at Green Mountain College and Chatham University. Dr. Catherine Miles, good to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here.
Good to have you with us. And alongside, we have... Say, Brian?
I said, don't worry, we'll change that.
We'll take care of that. We also have an additional Weather Service flavor to our broadcast in addition to Brian and Rick. We have Gary Satkowski. He is the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service at the Philadelphia, Mount Holly, New Jersey Forecast Office. He's been a Weather Service meteorologist since 1980 when he graduated from St. Louis University, or SLU, and has worked in a number of...
graduated from SLU.
Oh, did you? Oh, excellent. So very good. So we got a couple of SLU grads here. And Gary has worked not only in Philadelphia or Mount Holly, but also San Juan, Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C. And they handle right now forecast responsibility for much of eastern Pennsylvania, parts of New Jersey, Delaware, northeast Maryland, of course, Philadelphia. And was named a Hurricane Sandy hero by the Newark Star-Ledger. That's pretty cool. And all of this sort of folding into the story that's told in this book. Gary, good to have you on the program this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Really, thanks for the opportunity.
So I actually had a chance to meet Gary. He was passing through town on his way to talk to a conference, and I was able to take him out for barbecue here in North Carolina a couple years ago, not long after Sandy came through. And have you had any barbecue since then, Gary, that was as good as what you had here?
Not even close.
All right. That's the correct answer.
Yeah.
So Gary, I'll start with you. And not many meteorologists get to say that they are a major character in a book, and not just any book, but a book that's actually got a cover and a dust jacket and the whole 9 yards. Pretty fancy stuff. What does it feel like to be the star of a book?
It felt pretty weird when the book finally came out. You know, Kate came by the office months earlier before the book came out and did the interview, and that felt normal because you know a lot of times I'm chatting on the phone with a newspaper reporter or someone with TV or radio. You know, so kind of doing an interview or Q&A and chatting about stuff felt pretty normal. But then when I realized the book's coming out and I'm going to be in a book, that felt pretty different. That was a new experience.
So, Kate, why Superstorm Sandy? Why did you want to tackle this one in addition to the other two books that you'd written? What about this particular event made it worth writing about?
Well, you know, Sandy was such a unique storm in so many ways, particularly in terms of our national response to the storm. And I think that the storm exposed a lot of loopholes and weaknesses in various infrastructures that we had, and I think it's really important to explore that. And there were also some real heroes of the book, Gary being one of them, and I think it's a really important story. It's a harrowing story. It's a story of people making decisions, and I think increasingly it's a story that we're going to be confronted with in terms of our national weather.
So it's interesting you talk about loopholes. One of the quotes in the book, and full disclosure, they sent me a copy. I didn't pay for this. But it's been a good read. I've enjoyed reading it. And one of the quotes that I had flagged to ask you about is on the Saturday chapter about Saturday in the mid-200s, mid-250s. And the quote goes, let's see how far down, David Crisatello, who's a project planner for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, gets a phone call from Jamie Rome from the National Hurricane Center, and he says his heart sank when he saw Jamie's name come up on his cell phone. Quote, "There's a joke in this industry that when the National Hurricane Center has time to call you, it's a sure sign you're screwed." End quote. Tell me a little about that, and you talk about loopholes. Tell me about the loophole that this was right after Bloomberg's press conference that got all of weather, the Enterprise, just completely up in arms. Tell me a little about that and why that was such a big deal.
Well, as you all know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, part of what was so problematic about Sandy is that when it began to transition from sort of a classic hurricane into this hybrid storm or this ex-tropical system, the National Hurricane Center found themselves in the sort of unique position of not being able to forecast the storm because of the sort of, at the time, the narrowly defined nature of their protocols said that whenever a storm ceased to be purely tropical, they couldn't forecast it. So in the 11th hour, they found themselves trying to decide how to delegate responsibility, and there were several decisions. Gary was party to these, and he can speak in a lot more detail than I can. But in the end, the decision was made to hand off responsibility to these regional National Weather Service offices, which are fantastic and staffed by some of the best meteorologists in the world, but don't necessarily have the communication clout that the National Hurricane Center. So in the case of New York City, they wanted the information to be coming from the National Hurricane Center. It wasn't. They were sort of balking at the information they were getting from the Upton National Weather Service office. And so Mayor Bloomberg and the New York City Office of Emergency Management ultimately made the wrong decision when they were sort of confronted with the surge data. When Jamie Rome realized that, and when other forecasters realized that, they sort of scrambled and were in this sort of mass campaign to try to correct New York City's mistake and get them to make the similar kind of evacuation order that we saw anywhere from Connecticut down to Delaware.
So Gary, you mentioned that you were party to a number of these conversations and discussions, and as close to the center of this as you wound up being. Had a lot of work to do once these warnings were sort of dropped on your lap. Tell me about what that was like in the office for you guys once the Hurricane Center said, "Hey, we can't handle this anymore. The directives don't allow us to. It's all you."
Yeah, actually, we were involved with that discussion, and we were comfortable with it. We realized, after the fact, and in some cases during the process, that it left people quite uncomfortable. But at the time, we were the weather forecast offices, at least in the Mount Holly office, where I'm at. We were involved in that discussion. What we were actually trying to do was apply some of the lessons learned from the year before with Hurricane Irene, and we've seen over and over again, I think in practice, but what was documented in the Irene Service Assessment was that the general public doesn't understand a lot of the nuances of weather terminology. And when we do things like change the label, go from, say, a hurricane warning to a tropical storm warning, or transition from a tropical system, say a hurricane warning, to something at the non-tropical warning suite, all sorts of assumptions are made by the general public that would scare, I think, most meteorologists, particularly in the operational realm, if they really had a full understanding of it. So, like during Irene, what we saw is people made assumptions that the storm was no longer as big a threat when it went from hurricane to tropical storm, and then again when it transitioned from tropical storm to being non-tropical, and that caused serious problems up in New England, which were well documented in that report. So what we did, what my position that I laid out to my bosses and also to the Hurricane Center, was do not swap headlines at the last minute, being like the last 3, 6, 12, 24 hours before landfall. If we can stick with hurricane warnings through the event, let's do it. If we can't do that, and as Kate pointed out, the rules at that time didn't allow, that would not have been consistent with policy. Then I pushed probably as hard as anyone that we should believe our own forecast. Our forecast all along was that Sandy would no longer be a tropical system when it made landfall along the northeast U.S. coast. So let's believe our forecast and go and not go with hurricane warnings and then, let's say, 12 or 24 hours before landfall, switch to something else and send a completely off-kilter message to the public. Now, I still think that's a great argument. Obviously, there were some shortcomings with that, but at the same time, even in hindsight, I think that was the best of that situation. I think that if we had swapped warnings midstream, say about 12 hours before landfall or 6 hours before landfall, we changed to it no longer being a hurricane, to the non-tropical warning suite. I think there would have been people who let their guard down. I think there would have been people who took the wrong message away from that. You still see people misclassify the storm even now. When we made that transition, when it was no longer a hurricane, it still had the same intensity as it did when it made landfall. You hear a lot of people talking about how it weakened to a tropical storm when it made landfall, which didn't happen. So even the way we handled it, you still saw people making assumptions which weren't correct based on the impacts.
So one of the questions that that we had is it better, and this, I think the Hurricane Center grappled with this to a certain extent even after the fact, talking with a couple of the hurricane specialists down there, that continuing to issue tropical advisories on something that was not only forecast to not be tropical, how tropical it was at the exact moment it made landfall is there's still some debate over that, but looking at that, is that a legitimate thing in terms of keeping the public on the same page, or do you feel like we owe it to the science and to the meteorology to be accurate and to call a duck no matter what it is, even if at the last minute it changes course, or changes, I guess, nature, not course?
Well, if that question is directed to me, I'll just I'll jump on it and say, what I really think we need to do is, and how we do this is still not quite clear to me, but I have some thoughts on it. But we really need to get people to focus more on impacts and less on labels. Labels are a way to get people's attention, and then you tell them what's about to happen or what's about to befall them with this particular storm. I think people make a lot of assumptions. When something is a hurricane. Earlier this evening on Twitter, I was chatting about a survey that was done by the Vane, and basically even now, even post Sandy, a majority of New Yorkers would not evacuate unless it was a major hurricane. So even with the Sandy experience under their belt, they were asked, would you evacuate if you were supposed to, if you were told to, would you evacuate if it was a Category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you didn't get to a majority until it was at least a Category 3. So those people really, no one here on this call, no one within the weather enterprise ever told the citizens of New York City you shouldn't evacuate until it's a major hurricane. But somehow that's some part of their decision-making process. And I think fretting a lot regarding, is it what kind of label is it? Technically what's the storm? From a scientific perspective, isn't as productive an enterprise as figuring out what it is that people think when they're put in these situations where a hurricane is threatening, and then figuring out how we communicate most effectively with them to get so they get what they need to know, so they make the right decision. I think spending a lot of time worrying about the particular category of the storm or particular label of the storm may help from a communication standpoint, in the sense of the people who are trying to communicate it, whether you're in the media or the National Weather Service. But in terms of getting the desired response from the general public, I'm of the firm opinion that has very little relevance. That focusing on a scientific label doesn't mean much to them.
It runs me back to a question, and this is both for you and for Kate. I remember Saturday afternoon, the media conference call, and I give the Weather Service a lot of credit for holding these at regular intervals leading up to the event. And I remember the initial time we're going to drop the hurricane and tropical storm warnings north of the North Carolina-Virginia line. At this point, it was roughly in line with Hatteras, but to the east of Cape Hatteras, and was moving north. And we're going to discontinue all of those as it moves north because we forecast it to be extratropical. And I remember I'm live tweeting this, and I remember stepping back and thinking, did I hear what I just thought I heard? And what happened after that, including at our station, was we had to explain to people why the hurricane warnings were being dropped. And there was as an aside, the service assessment actually cited research saying that most of the people they interviewed in New York City thought they were under hurricane warning anyway, even though they weren't. But I remember everybody from certainly Raleigh on north had to at least spend some broadcast time explaining this and trying to back this out. And it leads into a question that Kevin had asked in the chat, and I'll ask it to both of you. Do you think that was a good decision from a media and public communication standpoint? And more broadly, do you think the media helped or hurt our communication efforts as an enterprise after that announcement and as Sandy approached the New York coastline?
Well, we live in a really brave new world as far as media is concerned. And, what the folks at the National Weather Service told me was, look, once upon a time, if you saw a radar image, it's because we produced it. And, we were the only game in town. And that gave us some time to kind of get our ducks in a row. But we live in this era of democratized media where, there's all these armchair meteorologists who are speculating. There's places like AccuWeather and the Weather Channel, there's the local weather person, and so we have a ton of information coming in. And what folks at the National Weather Service office told me was, sometimes that means they have to jump in the fray before they're really ready, and they have to really try to be heard. In a lot of other countries, England, Japan, Canada, for instance, the National Weather Service is directly tied to a national broadcast system. So there's a really clear delineation of how information gets relayed. And what we saw with Sandy was we saw some really great reporting happening and some really wonderful. If it weren't for the media, for instance, the push to get New York to change might not have been as effective. We had folks at the Weather Channel, we had folks at AccuWeather that were sort of screaming foul as soon as Bloomberg staged that kind of bizarre press conference. We also saw a ton of hype. We saw all of this sort of inflammatory language. We're naming our winter storms. We're talking about the polar vortex like it's some kind of sci-fi thing. And I think frankly, that consumers of media are getting a little immune to this and a little anesthetized. And, they're sort of like, look, you guys, you scream wolf every time this happens. And so maybe we're a little less inclined to believe you. And I think it's really beholden on journalists to really start thinking about the ethical standards that they need to be following in terms of informing people in a way that gets them to act when they need to act.
Along those lines, you talked about the Weather Service being able to jump in the fray or needing to jump in the fray ahead of time. And one of the things that got picked up from a Weather Service discussion was Frankenstorm, and I remember that hit the wire, and then people went nuts, and it's not a Frankenstorm, and da 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 da. Was that a good thing, bad thing? I mean, it it seemed to latch on once AP ran with it. It was in a lot of headlines and everything across the country for a couple of days, and then it almost as quickly as it came, it died down. And then not long after that, it was superstorm, and there's still a lot of heartburn about that term. Is that a good thing, bad thing? Gary mentioned that it does help to potentially raise awareness, but is it raising enough awareness to warrant the kind of heated discussions that it results in from time to time, and potentially communicate, or is it causing confusion with the public in terms of, is it a hurricane, is it a superstorm, is it a tropical storm, and what do we do if the next storm isn't a superstorm but it's still going to be bad?
Well, I think Gary's right. I think, what we call it is not nearly as important in terms of the effects. I think one of the really great things to come out of this is the investment in surge mapping. I think, when we're looking at surge, when we're looking at actual inundation, we're looking at the actual effects. That's really what's important. When I was talking to Mayor Bloomberg's staff, they said what he kept saying was, yeah, but I don't really understand. Like, what does this mean? Like, is it going to come up to my ankles? Is it going to come up to my knees? Is it going to flood my car? And I think that's what most Americans want to know is how is this going to affect me? Okay, I get that there's science, but the science doesn't tell me whether or not I need to pack up my kids and move to higher ground.
Any thoughts, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just kind of following up there with Kate, I think, I guess a couple points come to mind. First, following up with what Kate said, the storm surge map is, I'm really hopeful that the visual imagery there that, started this year is going to be a big step forward. But that being said, I'm not prepared to let any key decision makers off the hook. New York City, as well as New Jersey, and all the surrounding, states, they had they had storm surge inundation maps that, were coordinated, done through FEMA, through FEMA's coordination, actually done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The maps for New Jersey were done in 2010, so that's only a couple of years before Sandy. And what you needed to do to make that work was you just needed to take the number that the Hurricane Center was providing, the storm surge inundation number, and cross-pollinate it with the numbers that were on the map. And you could figure out there's like 4 different zones on the map, and you could just figure out, okay, this is going to flood all of Zone 1 and part of Zone 2, or whatever. And that was all available to Mayor Bloomberg when he made, when he's saying I don't know. That's sort of a refusal to use the tools and technology that were available at the time. Everyone had available to them that kind of information. The question was whether they were willing to use that information. And when I was reading Kate's book, I commend her that some of the information there from regarding New York City is filled in some blanks for me. To me. And again, this is I'm projecting here a little bit, but still, I saw what she had put in there. They really were reluctant to make a tough decision. That's what it basically came down to. You hear these comparisons to, it's going to be no worse than Irene the year before. Yet at the time they're saying that Irene had storm surge of around 4 to 4.5 feet. At the time they're saying that in the timeline in Kate's book, the Hurricane Center of Ray has come out with 4 to 8 feet, of surge, So why, immediately they're saying, it's going to be no worse than Irene, and yet the numbers coming from the Hurricane Center say it'll be at least as bad as Irene, and that's sort of like, hoping that's the best case scenario, and it could be a lot worse than Irene if you go with the higher number. So that's one thing regarding them. We're going back to what you said about the media. I mean, I'm really appreciative of the role of the media. Sure, none of us are perfect, and we can look at times when the media does things that we wish they could do better. But they're a tremendous communication tool. BAM's September this year issue had an article about the risk a risk assessment involving Hurricane Sandy on the part of the general public, and it found from the survey that there was near 100% awareness on the part of people that Sandy was coming. And when they asked why, media was by far the biggest reason why. So media is incredibly useful for getting people's attention when something life-threatening is coming their way, and say, look, here's something's coming, and you need to pay attention to it. Are there better ways to maybe communicate what that risk is? Sure. I mean, that's part of what I've been talking about. But in terms of getting that message out there and getting people to start to listen, the media is critical to the process. I don't know what we would do without them.
We talked about Weather Service getting into the fray again, and Gary, you've gone on what I can only describe as a couple of just epic Twitter rants. These tweet storm rants that are just they're fantastic, and I wind up just wanting to. I'm sitting back and applauding, number one, and then I just keep wanting to hit retweet, just retweet, because I think you got an interesting perspective on how we talk about these things. Tell us a little bit about what it is that sort of instigates these rants. And what you're hoping to accomplish by going on these tweet storms.
Well, obviously I feel better afterwards.
So it's therapeutic and or cathartic.
Yes, it's therapeutic, but really, I mean, I do think
just remember, Gary, that confession is good for the soul but bad for the career.
That's right. That's right. I try to remember that. Sometimes I succeed, most times I don't. Really, what for me, I mean, it's going to sound a little melodramatic, but for me, Sandy was a real game changer. One of my comments when I started to see some of the, I saw some bad things that happened during the event, but then saw some other things that happened immediately afterwards and how people were kind of spinning things. And I was sort of like, man, if they could screw up a 7-day forecast that was as good as we did with Sandy, talking about when we started doing the briefing packages out of the Mount Holly office, is there what's possible reason would there be to believe that if we started 8 days in advance or 9 days in advance, if we approached it from a scientific problem, or what particular word choice should we have used? I discarded that kind of stuff immediately. I've had a long and a very rewarding career with the National Weather Service and in operational meteorology, and what I'm seeing now, as I do approach toward the end of my career, is that there's been big changes in operational meteorology, and I don't think that that's being realized or appreciated. Just kind of one of the places I worked was Oklahoma City. So I remember when I got to Oklahoma City, which was in '82. This number sticks in my mind. Hopefully it's correct. But nationally, the tornado warning lead time was 2 minutes. That was, nationally, Oklahoma City was doing a little bit better, but nationally, the tornado warning lead time was 2 minutes. And as a scientist, your goal is obvious. You double that. And then when you get to 4 minutes, you double it again. And when you get to 16, you get to 8, just double it again. But there comes some point, whether it's at 16, 32, or 64 minutes of lead time for a tornado warning, you've got a whole different set of problems and opportunities that arise. And if you're continuing to look at that as a science issue, that I should just keep trying to improve a lead time, you're missing a whole bunch of opportunity to do some things differently and get much better results from the general public. And I think that was kind of, carrying that back to Sandy. That's what, if people can misuse information, even though they've been told the storm is coming 7 days in advance. The storm surge, numbers that I mentioned before, they wound up, the final numbers the Hurricane Center wound up going with was 6 to 11 feet of surge, and it came in at the Battery in New York City at 9 feet above, above the water level, 9 feet of surge. So I mean, they nailed it. And yet, if you read, you wouldn't know that from the decisions that were being made by decision makers immediately during that event, immediately prior to the storm's arrival, and I guess here's the let's see if I still have a job at the end of this presentation tonight. Weather forecasting has gotten so good, the key decision makers and others who are involved have to lie about what the weather forecast was to make their point, or quite frankly, to protect themselves. A painful example of this to me is New York City's after action report that came out 6 months after Sandy, where they have a completely bogus number in there regarding what the storm surge was, and they throw the Weather Service under the bus, saying that the storm surge was considerably worse than what the Weather Service forecast, and that's why, then they list a bunch of bad things that happened. It's a complete and utter falsehood, and yet it's part of the discussion. There are utility companies that have done the same thing. There are other political officials that have done the same thing, with Sandy. And then we see other things that happen more recently, like some traffic problems down in the Atlanta area, 5-inch snowfall rates in Buffalo, and you see decision makers make it sound like no one told them this was coming. And either the National Weather Service and the other parts of the Weather Enterprise certainly did tell them it was coming. And so this is part of the Twitter rants, is literally to just sort of tell the truth in a way that probably some key people would be uncomfortable with. But nonetheless, they need to hear it. Because when going back to the other thing I was just talking about, is just weather forecasting has gotten so good that really to me now the big problem is people, including key decision makers, are leaving too much good information on the table. They're not fully leveraging the information that's there, and then when bad things happen, then they turn around and actually try to blame the weather forecast when, frankly, it shouldn't be blamed. So that's kind of what's behind those, is that we really need to look at things differently. I'm a real big fan of social science now. I think it's very important that we look at the implications, the impacts of our forecast, and not just try to look at the technical details of the forecast. And that's hard for I make a lot of my coworkers uncomfortable. I'm certainly a minority viewpoint among the MICs of the Weather Service that I talk to. There are a lot who feel that we should continue, and I mean, we're going to continue to do this anyway. We're a bunch of geeks, we're a bunch of introverted scientists, so we couldn't help ourselves. We're going to try to continue to make the weather forecast better from a technical standpoint, but we need to be doing a whole lot of things differently besides just worrying about a technical aspect of the forecast at this point in time, because too much good stuff is still being left on the table when high-impact weather events are occurring.
Well, if I could just support Gary in that real quick, in my research for the book, going back 20 years, through newspaper articles and reports in New York City, I found countless examples of this where, the subways would flood because of a deluge rain effect, and they would, again, blame the National Weather Service when, in fact, the forecast had been spot on. And one of the things that really made Gary a hero of the storm is that he was willing to sort of step out of protocol and take a chance, I think, and say, listen, you need to listen. And, his personal plea, if you haven't read it yet, has already gone down in the annals of meteorological history as an absolute game changer. And his willing to make this sort of personal statement, to include his phone number, to say, look, you have to do this right now, and to speak in very human language to his constituency, saved lives. And I think it's going to be talked about for decades to come.
Rick, you had a couple of questions?
Yeah. First of all, Gary, I just want to say I admire what you do. I admire those tweet storms or whatever Nate called them, and I'm like some of your other coworkers, other MICs. It makes me a little squirmy, and I just had a couple of quick things as someone who is let's see. There's someone who's been gently corrected by people above me from time to time about social media activity. I just wonder if you care to talk about it.
Wow, what wordsmithing is going on there? Whoa!
That's why I get the whatever.
Yeah, right, the big bucks. I know.
Yeah.
I used to be there. Remember?
Gary, I just wonder, if you want to talk about it, have you had any feedback from your superiors on any of your activities on social media? And then I've got a follow-up after that.
If he hasn't before tonight, he's going to.
Yeah.
I'll be getting that call right after this show,
That's what, my cell phone is sitting right here. I'm waiting for it to ring.
Waiting for it to go.
Vibrate. It's on vibrate. I'll feel it shake.
That reminds me of a Mark Mathis. Reminds me of a Mark Mathis video clip where he was ragging on the general manager of his TV station. And he said, "I got my phone right here. Just give me a call."
In all candor, I was asked. When I first started with Twitter, it's kind of a new thing, and I'm kind of feeling my way along. And I had rather prominently displayed National Weather Service in my little, 3-line bio that's underneath your Twitter handle and stuff. And so I took that out. I think it was, it made them more comfortable if I removed the reference to National Weather Service. Other than that, no. It's it's pretty much been I say these things and then I wait to see what happens, and I really haven't gotten any feedback, or any pressure. I mean, I want to thank Kate for those very kind words, and I'm just going to, about what I did, and just kind of say, and my bosses have used that. My boss, my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss. I've seen them all reference, Gary Zadkowski and the personal plea and, effective communication. So they're comfortable and they're not asking my permission, and they don't need to ask my permission. That's all out there. I did that, and that's part of the record. But they're comfortable using that, to carry on a message that they want to carry on. And so I'm comfortable, carrying on a message that I want to see carried on. I am. What I really want is for the Weather Service and the rest of the weather enterprise to get the credit it deserves. It is tough when you stand up to politicians or criticize politicians, because there is this perception that in some cases they are the holders of the purse strings. But I do believe that at times, sometimes you have to tell the emperor how the new clothes are looking, and you just have to go ahead and tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And I think that having key decision makers say things about the weather forecast that isn't true, one, allows them to evade, responsibility for some not so good decision making they made, but also sets up the general public for failure the next time around. There's a lot of folks in the New York City area, I'm sure, who believe the numbers that New York City put out regarding what happened during Sandy in terms of the storm surge, rather than the real numbers. And the next time a storm threatens and we start tossing numbers around again, I'm going to be very sensitive. If I see people starting to make comparisons to Sandy and I see them miscompare, I'm going to immediately see if they're referencing some of the bad numbers that were put out by New York City. The sooner we get that stopped, the better we're going to be. That's just the way I look at it.
Right. Well, again, I admire what you're doing, and maybe it has something to do with the closer you are to retirement. I don't know. Maybe there's a correlation there, but I'm not as close as you are. And one more thing about, I was glad Catherine mentioned the personal plea. I haven't been in your situation to the scope of this event, but I've been in a similar situation where you've got to make that, what I think is one of the toughest decisions for a meteorologist, weather service meteorologist, or anybody, is when to break that glass and really pull out all the stops and use the scary, scary language. What went on with your thought process, and was there any hesitation? What went on when you were crafting that personal plea, and was there, I'm just curious what was going on in your mind as you were preparing to do that, and what your thoughts were.
Well, yeah, my concern was, we were seeing, and of course, you're in the heat of battle, so you're really kind of depending on, sort of some very sketchy data points during a very busy time. But from talking with some of the emergency managers, it seemed clear that we were not getting as good a response as we would have liked to have seen, as they would have liked to have seen, in terms of getting people to evacuate from the Jersey Shore. And this was on the heels of that very, as the has been pointed out, that what I call the very bad, Mayor Bloomberg press conference, where he punted on the evacuation decision. And New York City is huge. Philadelphia's in our service area, New York City's not, but close to the northern, third or 40% of my service area is in the New York City media market. So I could feel that decision, subjectively, it's an opinion, but I could feel that decision, by the mayor weighing on people and pulling them in a direction I didn't want to see them go. And so those were a couple things that really kind of, caused me to kind of, step outside from, behind, step out onto the stage, a little more, break the glass and become human and talk to people and tell them what they needed to do. So in human terms, and talk to them as though they were a friend or a family member, and say, hey, this is going to be really bad, and here's why, and here's what you need to be thinking about. So that was some of what was going on in real time.
To me, it's interesting that if we look over the last, going back to Katrina and maybe even farther back, that some of the examples of the most effective weather service communication have been in situations where folks basically disregarded the protocol. If you look back to May 3rd, 99 and the tornado emergency, You look at the doomsday PNS from Katrina and the certain death from Ike, the personal plea. They've gotten names. And the fact that I'm able to refer to them by names, and the fact that they were extra directive kinds of things, or certainly pushing the directives in ways that they were probably not envisioned to go. Do you have any thoughts on that? And is that a legitimate sense that I've got? And if so, or if not, what your thoughts are on that?
I think it does. You're onto something there, because I do think that, again, it talks about the ways in which we communicate risk. That when we communicate risk in a way that we're scientists, we're trying to communicate something of a technical nature, but when we want people to understand, if you're asking people to evacuate, that's a very emotional response. You're asking them to think with both their head and their heart, and you've got to touch both of those in a way that it gives them a fighting chance to make the right decision in a very tough situation. And the way, if we're just kind of continuing to issue products and put out headlines, you're talking pretty much to their head. I think that all the examples you've talked about in some way, shape, or form talk to the person's heart. That it talks to them. We step away from being just a technical person or just being a scientist, and now we're a scientist talking in a way that people can understand. I mean, again, I guess what a lot of times I compare meteorology to the medical profession, and one of the things is, sometimes the best doctor, you want a doctor who's really, really sharp, but really the best doctor is really one who's smart, but who has a great bedside manner, who knows how to communicate some very tough information in some cases effectively, and get you to a place where you or a loved one can make some challenging decisions. And it's the human part of the communication as opposed to the technical part of the communication that helps bridge that gap. So you got to know what you're talking about, but you got to do it in a way that matters and in a way that touches people. And I think everything you touched upon, everything you just listed there, were things that where people kind of stepped out and behaved differently, and people noticed that and reacted accordingly.
Taking pot shots from Kevin here in the chat, who said that he just bought Catherine's book, whereas calling me cheap. Hi, Kevin. She volunteered to send it to me, by the way. I didn't beg, although I'm not above begging. Unfortunately, we've lost Catherine on the line. Hopefully, not sure if we're going to be able to get her back. We'll try. But one of the things that I liked about the book, reading through it, was how it's not just about the meteorologist, but also about some of the non.
Uh-oh. Hello. Did we lose Nate?
Yeah. Nate just locked up.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pose we have. Hey, let me throw in one question. This is from John Tui Morales, Gary, who is with NBC6 in Miami. He says he's confused. He's argued that dropping the warning cost lives, yet the service assessment says it didn't matter. So his question is, did it or did it not?
I don't think it did. I mean, I would certainly be far less supportive of the the decision-making process if I thought there was any sign that we cost people's lives. That's the ultimate price. There are multiple surveys that have been done. Sandy, I think, is probably going to wind up being the most well-studied storm from both a technical science perspective and a social science perspective, and there are a couple studies already where, as was touched upon earlier, there were some people up in the New York City area who thought they were under a hurricane warning even though they weren't. And then there were others who realized correctly the type of warning that they were under. And then of each of those groups, there were a bunch of those folks who were supposed to evacuate. They asked those people in those two different groups, did you actually evacuate? Both evacuation rates were depressingly low. I still remember the numbers. One was a 35% evacuation rate, and the other one was a 33% evacuation rate. And the slightly lower number was actually among those who believed it was a hurricane. They were under a hurricane warning. So it's just difficult for me to see any convincing data that shows that people engage in the desired response just because you call it a hurricane. I've talked with some of our media partners, post Sandy, and I do understand loud and clear that it is easier in the media world if you call it a hurricane and explain it as a hurricane than if you try to explain it as a post-tropical cyclone. So and I don't think, and I'm not dismissive of that, because I talked about earlier about the importance of the media in terms of getting the message to people, getting people to listen to what the message is, and the media is critical to at least getting people to interrupt sort of their busy daily lives, as I call it. You jiggle their elbow and you get them to listen for a minute or two, or maybe just 30 seconds, and at that point in time, then you pivot to the information that they need to know. So calling it a hurricane, certainly is a simpler label than trying to do other things. And the other thing was, we were calling it Hurricane Sandy up until shortly before it arrived, and so and then because it was no longer technically a hurricane when it arrived, we changed the label. But up until just several hours before it made landfall, it was still Hurricane Sandy. So we were referring to it as Hurricane Sandy, like in our briefing packages and stuff like that. We also explained why we were going with the types of warnings we were going with, because we expected it to change. It's from a labeling standpoint, but. The bottom line is, I think a lot of folks knew something was coming. This BAMS article, 100% of the people knew that something was coming. And again, one of my emergency managers in Monmouth County, New Jersey, near the northern portion of the Atlantic coast, he said you had to be from another planet if you didn't know Sandy was coming. So people knew something bad was on the way. The question then is, how much does a hurricane warning convince them that that's the particular type of bad, that helps them define that level of bad. Mm-hmm. I like a storm surge map a whole lot more, quite frankly. I think that hopefully will scare people a whole lot more than in a good way than the label of a hurricane warning.
So Kate is back and joined us from the emergency backup location here. So I'm going to try and pepper her with a couple of questions before she falls off and before we have to run off again. I mentioned while you were away that one of the interesting stories, and one of the things I like about the book, was that you weaved through a couple of other stories that weren't Weather Service government-y things, and one of those was the story of the Bounty. Without giving away the meat of the book, tell us why that was compelling and why you included it.
Well, this is really my sort of initial foray into the story. I'm a sailor, and my previous book was about a tall ship. And so when the Bounty sank during Superstorm Sandy, I had the same question that I think a lot of people did, which is, how in the hell did it end up in the middle of this storm? And I wrote an article about that for Outside Magazine. And, in my research, a lot of people, I think very rightly, questioned the captain's decision to sail into the storm. The ship sank catastrophically. It resulted in one of the most expensive and arguably the most dangerous rescues in Coast Guard history. The captain, Robin Walbridge, died, and so did one of his crew members, a woman named Claudia Christian. And I think in a lot of ways this serves as a really powerful parable for how we all choose to deal with risk. I think, Robin's decision to sail into the storm, while ultimately obviously very sort of ill-fated, was a decision that a lot of us make. And one of the most chilling statistics for me in my research for the book was the fact that at least 70% of the people in evacuation order areas told to evacuate chose to resist that order. They thought they'd be fine. There's a real kind of hubris there, I think. And when I interviewed sociologists who specialize in risk and risk assessment, they said, look, ask the average American what the greatest risk they face on a daily basis is, and they'll tell you terrorism and nuclear disaster, when in fact those risks are incredibly unlikely, when driving a car is quite possibly the most dangerous thing that we do, and frankly natural disaster is up there as well. So I really wanted this to be a parable and a kind of metaphor, obviously an extreme one, but for the decisions that all of us make and the consequences that are inherent in those decisions.
So one more question. We're sort of running out of time here. I got one more question for you and one for Gary, and they're kind of related, and I'll start with you. What did you learn in the course of writing the book as an outsider to the weather enterprise? What lessons do you feel like the book and your research hold for us in getting our message across and encouraging people to evacuate more in the future when they're called upon to do so.
You know, I've been on a real soapbox since writing and publishing this book about the need to invest in our meteorological infrastructure, and I'm not going to get off this soapbox until people start listening to me. And, you know, the one thing I absolutely took away from this book is just how fantastic and absolutely essential our national meteorologists are, people like Gary, people like yourselves, how underfunded our national weather system has been since its inception, and how sort of mishandled it's been in the face of political infighting. And so the take-home message for me is that national security and our personal safety is intrinsically tied to the degree to which our National Weather Service forecasters can do their jobs, and we've got to start investing them and really sort of investing in their ability to do their jobs, or our entire country is at risk.
Bravo, bravo.
Preach on, preach on.
And Gary,
You're definitely on my list, my good list.
I think Catherine should take over for James as host of the
About to say, she's got the
I think
job.
so,
It's
too.
hers.
So,
Hey, Catherine, I have to say, as a personal side note, I was once, after a major tornado outbreak, trying to do storm surveys. NOAA has this ceiling on comp time, and I hit that ceiling of 80 hours. So I had to just, according to the rules, I had to just stop working. I didn't. You know, I probably worked another 40 or 50 hours of comp time that I didn't get any compensation for. But the job had to be done.
You know, at the time of Sandy, we had approximately 300 empty forecasting and high-level technician positions in the National Weather Service. That was an egregious number. It's risen by over 100 since Sandy. This is appalling. All Americans should be outraged by this.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you.
So Gary, kind of a related takeaways question. You've mentioned that you're closer to retirement than you were when you were a spring chicken in Oklahoma City and in other places. As you look back and look at some of the new folks coming into the business, what sort of lessons do you hope that they take from Sandy and from some of the higher impact events that we've seen in the last few years, and I hope that they will continue. They will learn and propagate on to the next generation of forecasters.
Yeah, what I really would hope, again, kind of looking over the arc of my career, is that as operational meteorology has changed, we have to change, and that the nature of the communication has become much more challenging. That there's a lot of when you've only got let's say stick with the hurricane here. If you only know a hurricane's coming a day or two in advance, it really limits your options and your decision making, and you kind of just get onto a message or two and you just stick with it, and then you literally ride through the event. But when you can start talking about storms 5, 6, 7 days in advance, that opens up a whole new area of opportunity, but also challenge and problems that people can go. We've seen, and again, Kate pointed out again in her book, about the bounty. There was plenty of good information there to make a good decision, yet a bad decision was made because there was enough uncertainty and enough risk and enough things that if you wanted to look for the data you wanted to justify a decision you wanted to reach, you could kind of filter and get there. I think the challenge for operational meteorologists in the future is make sure people are getting the information they need and trying to tilt the odds, in their favor that they'll make a good decision. They at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to make the decision, whether it's a homeowner, a business owner, a mayor, or a governor. They've got to make the decision, not the weather forecaster. But our job now is to give them the information, not just the best technical information, but in a way that they can understand it and incorporate it into their decision-making process and make what oftentimes is a tough decision. So it's a lot more about communication, I think, over the next, say, as opposed to 20 years ago in the past, you could really be focused on technical excellence, and that would take you pretty darn far. I think 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot about how we're communicating risk, and there's certainly going to be a technical aspect, but there's going to be a communications aspect as well.
Hey, Gary, let me ask you this, and we got to move on after this, and I hope you two can stick around for a few more minutes. You know, what do we do about these bonehead politicians? You know, this problem's not going to go away, and the first thing, and your Twitter feed is great. Everybody needs to follow Gary on Twitter. I mean, this guy, he's great. He gets it. His material is fantastic. But what do we do? I mean, I don't think this problem's ever going to go away. You know, they're going to come in and blame somebody else for their problems, whether it's the Weather Service or private sector, whatever. Is there any hope for this problem?
Well, I'm hopeful. You know, just looking at my own agency, you know, we did not, I think other than some very mild verbal comments, we didn't challenge in any way, shape, or form the New York City After Action report that came out 6 months afterwards, even though it was, you know, it said things that were just simply not true regarding the storm surge and the storm surge forecast. I actually saw our public affairs folks, you know, make a comment that got some traction in the media regarding, you know, the recent stuff with Governor Cuomo in New York and the Buffalo snowstorm. So I think every journey starts with the, you know, first step. I think we're seeing the first steps or two, you know, that and the other thing I like to see that I've you know, liked when I've seen it happening is that when these when key decision makers make a statement that just, you know, crosses some boundary there, it's just simply either not true or a very unfair characterization of the weather forecast. I see sort of it's not, I don't think it's organized, it's sort of an organic but coherent response, you know, in the weather enterprise. I see other people on Twitter, social media, in the media itself, you know, saying, hey, no, you're wrong. You know, that's not, here's what the weather forecast said. Hey, look, here's the forecast discussion where they said it was going to snow at 5 inches an hour. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people, you know, someone in the private sector found that before I did, and that was in a Weather Service product, you know, regarding the Buffalo storm. So I'm hopeful that, to me, it's most fundamental. Politicians operate on a power transaction basis, and for a long time, you could get away with kind of kicking the weather forecaster. Again, we use the term geek. Geek is now a little more classy than, or has a little more positive connotation than it used to be. But most of these key decision makers are getting a little older in their years like me. And back when they were like in high school, the geek was not the respected person. The geek was the one you made fun of or you picked on or whatever. I think there's a habitual behavior among portions of the, you know, the key decision makers to kind of feel that they can always safely pick on the weather forecast and the weather forecaster. I think when it no longer becomes safe, they'll move on to a different target. And so and that's again going back to like the Twitter rants. It's becoming increasingly unsafe to say something that's inaccurate, untrue about the weather forecast. At least if I'm watching. There's others who are doing that, and I think that's just. I think when the power transaction changes to where there's more negative than positive, I think you'll start to see some changes. But it's going to require some, you know, it's going to require a change. You know, one of the definitions of insanity supposedly is, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different response. The weather enterprise has to behave differently if it expects to see politicians behave differently.
Exactly. All right, and Catherine, everybody needs to buy your book. So how can they buy your book?
Well, the best way to do it is to go to an independent bookstore because we love to support those. And if you want to get it on Amazon, that would be great too.
Now, do you have an audio version like on audible.com yet?
Not yet, but if you want to give me a call, I'd be happy to read it to you over the phone.
There you go. Call Catherine. She'll do an individual session. She'll read the whole book just for you for the low price of $9,999. All right, and if y'all can stick around for just a little bit, we're going to take a quick break here for Professor Peters, and we've got the astronomy report from Tony Rice. We've got Nate's news, and Aubrey is out, but I'll read at least one email because one just came in. I'll read the one that came in. We've got picks of the week and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
The southeast U.S. was covered by some thin cirrus clouds over the weekend, and that cirrus produced a number of outstanding sundogs. I can't say that I've ever heard a sundog bark, but I've seen plenty of them, sometimes in pairs. A sundog is either of two colored luminous spots that appear at roughly 22 degrees on both sides of the sun. They are caused by the refraction of sunlight passing through ice crystals. They are most commonly seen during winter in the middle latitudes and are exclusively associated with cirriform clouds. Sundogs typically, but not exclusively, appear when the sun is low, near the sunrise and sunset times, and the atmosphere is filled with ice crystals forming cirrus clouds, but diamond dust and ice fog can also produce them. Sundogs are often bright white patches of light looking much like the sun, hence another common name, mock sun. Sometimes they exhibit a spectrum of colors ranging from red closest to the sun to a pale bluish tail stretching away from the sun. Red light is refracted less strongly than blue, and so the inner or sunward edges of the sundogs are red-hued. The scientific name for sundogs is perihelia, and sundogs occur worldwide. Sundogs form as sunlight is refracted by hexagonal plate-like ice crystals with diameters larger than 30 micrometers and with their flat faces horizontally oriented. The difference between sundogs and halos is the preferential orientation of the ice crystals through which the light passes before reaching our eyes. If the hexagonal crystals are oriented with their flat faces horizontal, a sundog is observed. But should the hexagonal crystals be randomly oriented, a halo is observed. Plate crystals rarely float exactly horizontal. They wobble, and this wobble increases with crystal size. Wobbly plates produce tall sundogs, and in the more extreme cases, the distinction between a tall sundog and fragments of a 22-degree halo becomes somewhat arbitrary. Well, that's WeatherBrains 101 for this edition. If you have questions about weather terms, you can drop them to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, I'm Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook for the week of December 8th. The Geminid meteor shower will be active this week, peaking Saturday night. Leavings from the asteroid 3200 Phaethon produces a show each year that meteor lovers mark on their calendars for a number of reasons. It produces the most meteors of the year, about 120 per hour under optimal conditions, and sometimes approaching 200 per hour. While most meteor showers are produced by dust left by comets, Phaethon is an asteroid, leaving a gravelly trail producing more brilliant streaks across the sky. The Geminids also tend to be more colorful, often appearing yellow. 3200 Phaethon itself is a bit of a mystery. Discovered back in 1983, its orbit left little doubt that it was the source of the Geminids. However, what to call it is still being debated. It looks like a rocky asteroid, perhaps a chunk knocked off a much larger main belt asteroid, or it may be what's called a rock comet. Rock comets are mostly rock, but have tails like comets. Their tails are made up of debris scorched right off the surface as it comes close to the sun. NASA's stereo satellites observed 3200 Phaethon ejecting about 30 metric tons of dust back in 2009 and 2012. It's a lot, but it's not enough to explain the brilliant meteor shower each year. Caltech scientists theorize that the rock comet may be a bit like a log on a campfire, usually burning pretty steadily, but occasionally spitting out a big shower of sparks. For best views of the Geminids, find the clearest night sky you can get access to, as free from light pollution as possible. Give yourself 15 or 20 minutes for your eyes to get used to the dark. You'll see much more. Don't believe me? Find a constellation like Orion when you first go out, and then look at it again about 20 minutes later. You'll see what I mean. Best views will be after midnight local time, where the spot you are standing on Earth rotates into the stream of debris in space. If the constellation Gemini to the left of Orion is blocked by trees or buildings, don't worry. Meteors can and will be seen anywhere in the sky. Geminids appear to be streaking away from the radiant point in Gemini. Looking away from Gemini actually may help you see a bit more, as the last quarter moon there will be pretty bright. If clouds spoil your view on Saturday night, don't give up. The Earth will be in the debris stream until at least December 17th. Meteors have been seen for the past several days now. I saw a nice green one just last night while watching the International Space Station pass over North Carolina. That's your astronomy outlook. You can follow me at RTP Hokie on Twitter for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink, by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
I think we'll let Gary do the weather roundup because the Northeast United States has the big event. So, Gary, tell us what you're going to have in Philly for the next few days.
It's going to be mainly a rain event for Philly, and we're under a flood watch there. So we're looking at a couple inches of rain potentially, and we had some rain just a couple days ago. So things are pretty soggy here. So Worried about wind and coastal flooding along the New Jersey and Delaware coastline, and you got to go all the way up into the Poconos, about an hour and a half, 2 hours west of Philadelphia. And up there we're looking at maybe 6 to 9 inches of snow. So we'll have the whole range of precipitation types, but this particular storm is going to be more wet than white.
I got you. Cool. And the other big story is out on the West Coast. We need a California, Oregon, Washington State person here. Rick is the closest guy we have, and he's in Oklahoma. So, but they're going to get a lot of rain out there. It looks pretty wet. I saw some of the QPF charts suggesting, San Francisco Bay getting over 6 inches of rain for the next few days and some wind. And you go work your way north, I saw some QPF output for Seattle for almost like 10 inches for the next 5 days. So hopefully that will be of some benefit to California. Not that a rain event is going to break a long-term drought, but, it just can't hurt, I guess. So that's the deal. And again, it seems like the Arctic flow is shut down for a while. But there's thoughts of a pattern change late this month. We'll just have to wait and see on that. And again, this is December 8th. But let's go right into Nate's news, because I get the idea that Nate has some interesting news to share. So let me roll the music here. Ladies and gentlemen, if it's news to us. Here's Nate.
Couple of interesting items involving Dr. Marshall Shepard, friend of the show. One, he made an announcement last week that a couple of episodes of Weather Geeks, which is the show that he hosts on the Weather Channel on Sunday afternoons at noon, will be recorded live in front of a live studio audience at the AMS annual meeting in Phoenix the first week of January. No confirmation to any of the rumors that we're hearing that signs will be used like on a college game day on ESPN with the crowd behind them. I'm personally hoping for a few great signs there, and hopefully they'll show them. We'll see. Also, Dr. Shepard was labeled Protector of the Earth at an event this past weekend, sponsored by the Captain Planet Foundation. Was given this award, this recognition, based on his outreach on issues such as climate change and weather forecasts out there. So certainly congratulations to Dr. Shepard, friend of the show, on both the success for Weather Geeks and for the recognition. We certainly are happy for him for that, and appreciative that we've got a strong voice out there, much like Catherine and Gary out there, sort of telling the good story about weather. Mike Smith from AccuWeather also posts a lot to his blog and to Twitter, talking about how weather forecasts are a lot better than they used to be, and they're really good, and we're not getting the kind of credit that we should. Finally, both Raytheon and Weather Decision Technologies, or WDT, announced a partnership, joint development of some software that will allow their international and commercial customers the same kind of data-driven forecasting that the Weather Service enjoys using AWIPS and things like that. Interesting to see where that goes. I know a lot of weather weenies would love to have a home version of AWIPS that doesn't cost $1 bazillion and that relies on the data that's out there instead of having to pay for data through a particular vendor. Would love to see something like that come along for us, but for now, that is sort of a pipe dream at this point. So with that, that's all the news. If you have anything you'd like to have us include, shoot it to us. Email at weatherbrains.com, or you can find me on the Twitter. I am at NSJ.
You know why Dr. Shepard's doing that show live at the AMS? He saw you guys at the NWA, and that show was so good, so good, he wants to emulate that. So,
oh boy.
Oh boy, that's the right word. And again, Aubrey is not here, but we haven't done one of these in a while, so we got to dig up the email here for you.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
No, I'm not the email guy, but one just came in a second ago, and hey, there we go. So, hello, WeatherBrains. This is Cody from Canada, and I have a question. I read from news sources saying that this year is likely to be an El Nino year. I was just wondering what a tornado season would typically be like during an El Nino, a La Nina, or a neutral year regarding location, frequency, and intensity. Hope everyone is doing well, and I wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Our El Nino tornado correspondent is Rick Smith, because he's in Oklahoma City, and he has all the answers. Rick?
Well, why can't my audio be messed up now?
Yeah, we can't hear you, man. Your audio's messed up.
Sorry. That's a great question. I saw that email come in, and I don't have a good solid answer. We don't. I mean, there's not a lot of close correlation. I mean, people ask that a lot around here, and our answer always is there's not a dramatic difference either way in either of those patterns here in the southern plains, and so there's no strong correlation that I'm aware of, at least in our area here.
And I think I can speak for. Well, let's let Brian speak for Dixie Alley. Brian is our Dixie Alley tornado El Nino correspondent, the INSO guy. Brian.
Well, I know that there seems to be a relationship between El Nino and a less active hurricane season, but my impression is that we tend, in the southeast anyway, to have a bit more active tornadoes in an El Nino. Active tornado seasons.
The paper that I saw that came out of the Birmingham office, I want to say in the mid to late 90s, about the relationship between INSO and the tornado season, at least in Dixie Alley, not traditional Tornado Alley where Rick is out there, and there does seem to be a little increase in activity here. But I agree with what Rick said. It's going to be hard to prove a direct correlation. We have had tornado activity in Dixie Alley with an El Nino, La Nina, and INSO neutral conditions. So I'm not real big into looking at that, and I'm not so sure we're that good at predicting an INSO phase anyway, because how long ago was it that a super El Nino was being predicted? When was this? Back in the summer? And I don't think that's happening unless one of you guys prove me wrong here. But whatever, I don't think there's a direct correlation. So again, if you've got some emails, please send them to us, email at weatherbrains.com. We're going to give Aubrey the whole show next week. We're going to do 3 hours of email. And look, we don't have a fog bank here, but before we go to the picks of the week, and I'm going to have to let Nate be the facilitator here, but we do have an audio piece from Tarmo, and I like to play these because I just like to hear this guy talk, okay? So this is our friend of the show, Tarmo Tanelsu from Estonia, ladies and gentlemen. He's got a rant, and by golly, if he wants a rant, he's got the floor. So take it away, Tarmo, and after that, Nate, you pick it up for Picks of the Week.
Hello, WeatherBrains. This is Tarmo Tanelsu from Lauja, Estonia. On Sunday, the Weather Channel program Weather Geeks touched on the topic that, at least to me, feels sometimes more contentious than the topic that gets buzzed on this show. Yes, I mean winter storm names. And with this, I have a rant. When you think of Europe and the storm names, you might think the Free University of Berlin and its Adopt a Vortex program. However, in practice, there is a smorgasbord being a Swedish word, by the way, of storm names out there. In a sense, it is understandable, given that Free University of Berlin might not give a name at all if Central Europe isn't affected. But Finnish have their own, Swedes have their own, Norwegians have their own, and not only they. At least I've noticed, at least last year, during these ugly storms we had last autumn, Sweden and Norway seemed to coordinate with each other, so there would not be name collisions amongst them. But this is not the case with Finland. Case in point, a storm last year which Free University of Berlin named Christian. Sweden used name Simon. Finland, however, according to an article in a Finnish newspaper, Helsingin Sanomat, kept it unnamed. In Finland, by the way, also other types of severe weather, such as QRCS events, can get a name. Also, unlike the Norwegian system, Swedish and Finns use name day calendar to give names by the day it hits. Back to Christian. This storm is also known as St. Jude's Day storm, a name that got spread around from the Weather Channel UK office. Good for them for at least using a name related to that day. They joined the club that autumn, by the way. But this is not all. After Christian hit, the Danish Meteorological Institute was requested by the then Minister of Climate and Energy to start naming storms themselves. Christian was retroactively named Allan in Denmark. So now we have them in the club as well. Another example, Cyclone Xaver, which hit in December 2013, named as Xaver by the Germans, Bodil by Danish, and Sven by the Swedish. Okay, I get it. Methodologies differ. For example, Free University of Berlin names all highs and lows. The cultures differ. The languages differ. But I think we Europeans need to talk as well, because this is going to get very confusing. Imagine someone hearing that an ugly storm A has just hit UK, ugly storm B has hit Germany, ugly storm C has hit Denmark, ugly storm D has hit Sweden, and now an ugly storm E is about to slam into Finland, but it is really the same ugly storm A. My head hurts. An Estonian proverb says that a good child has many names. Only a meteorological sadist would think that storms are good children. Rant over. By the way, Free University of Berlin has named the Greenland's bomb cyclone, which at the recording time is expected to have sub 945 millibar central pressure by sometime Tuesday, has been named Alexandra. We are also in for a windy week ourselves here in Estonia. Stay tuned. This has been Tarmo Danilso from Laguja, Estonia. You can follow me on Twitter at ES5NHC.
Thank you, Tarmo, for the view from across the pond. I don't know that anybody here disagrees with any of that, so good stuff. Let's move on to Picks of the Week. This is the part of the show where we talk about something weather-related, and it can be anything, a website, a book, a journal article, a movie, whatever, and sort of a free-flowing kind of a thing. I will get us started tonight, an article on mental floss, about why we track Santa Claus, specifically why NORAD tracks Santa Claus. You've probably seen the website. It's a really interesting and kind of a cute story as to why they do it, and you'll read it and you'll think, wow, that's bound to be fake. Nope, it's true. You can read it on Snopes.com too, so check that out on the link on WeatherBrains.com. All right. Rick Smith, you're next to my my left here on my screen as I read left to right. Your pick of the week, good sir.
Well, my pick of the week, I actually turned it in very early. I should get extra points from Brian or someone.
You did. I'm sorry, I've been wrestling you.
And I'm not going to change it this week either. So my pick of the week is Snow Crystals, snowcrystals.com. I came across this getting ready for a winter weather workshop we did with our media last week, and very cool pictures, very cool imagery, very cool science about snowflakes and dendrites and the science of ice and things like that. So it's a very cool website, and for the next few months at least, something to look at.
All right. Next to my left here going down the line is Kevin Selly, who's ducked out to go look at the fog, and that is his pick of the week, a Twitter picture of the fog from the tower cam at his television station in Wichita Falls. You can see the tower cam, which is 600 feet up above the ground, looking down over this very thin in terms of the vertical depth, but very thick in terms of optical depth. This layer of fog there in Wichita Falls is pretty impressive stuff. Kate Miles, a pick of the week from you. We've been seeing this going back and forth in the chat, and it's actually already been registered on Twitter with approval. Your pick of the week.
Well, I was going to go with surf, since we don't often get it in Maine, but it's going to be a great one tomorrow and Wednesday. But instead I went with Eric Holthouse. I said I have such a crush.
Eric is good people, and writes for Slate, has written for a couple of different groups recently, but he is a writer for Slate. Actually sort of made his cut his teeth, I think, in terms of the public view, although he's been doing this for some time, writing for the Wall Street Journal when I believe it was either Irene or Sandy. I can't remember which one of the storms there, but certainly glad to. He's been on the program in the past, and we'll have him on again in the future. Brian Peters, a pick of the week from you, sir.
Sure. Since WeatherBrains 101 was about sundogs, I'm going to go to a wonderful site that has a lot of great photography that's over in the UK, and it's atoptics.co.uk, and I'll put the link up there. but it's got
All right.
beautiful, beautiful pictures.
Fantastic. And finally, Gary Sadkowski, pick of the week, sir. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. It's it's in the BAM's September 2014 issue. It's called, the article is The Dynamics of Hurricane Risk Perception, surveys of coastal residents conducted in 2012 as hurricanes were approaching reveal widespread misunderstanding of the extent and nature of threats posed by tropical cyclones. I think that's our new frontier. You make a big step in solving this problem, you're going to make a name for yourself in operational meteorology.
Sounds good. And BAM's the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. You do not have to be a member or a subscriber to read those articles. You just go to ametsoc.org, and you can click on publications and find the bulletin there and read that article for free if you would like to check out. And we'll have a link to all of that on weatherbrains.com. Any final comments as we wrap up here? Kate, Gary, how can folks get a hold of you on the internet if they want to find you?
I have an author site, which is katherinemiles.net, and there's superstormthebook.com, and I really welcome thoughts either about Sandy or disaster preparedness or anything else folks want to share.
You gonna write another book?
Yeah,
about an
I'm
upcoming
working on
disaster?
earthquakes right now.
Oh, wow. And Gary, how can we find you on the internet?
Probably the easiest way is on Twitter. I really do like Twitter, so it's based on my name. It's at Gary Zetkowski, all one character string, and it's a good way to get a hold of me.
Sounds good. We'll have a link to that on weatherbrains.com after the show's over, once it gets posted later on tonight or early tomorrow morning. Gary, Kate, we certainly appreciate you having you on the program tonight, and certainly look forward to the next tweet storm from Gary and the next book from Kate, and hopefully we'll have you guys both back on again sometime down the road.
Thanks so much. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap up the show here. Weather Brains is the weekly show all about the weather, the original weather netcast. You can catch us live via Google Hangout. We record typically on Monday nights, unless there's Alabama or Florida State football on Monday nights, in which case Brian is off watching football or some crazy nonsense like that. And but typically we record on our show here 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern Time on Monday nights. You can send us an email at weatherbrains.com. You can find us on Twitter at weatherbrains. We're on Facebook, Google+, all that good stuff as well. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, and we love getting those iTunes comments. Let us know what you think about the show. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. We love hearing from you. With that, we'll send the show to the recording presses, and we'll see you next week. Until then, I am not James Spann. Good night, and God bless.
Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks,
Gary,
everybody.
Kate, thank you, guys. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Kate.
It's a great
Thank you,
show.
Gary.
Great
Appreciate
stuff.
it. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Y'all take care. Bye.
touchdowns and 1 field goal in a half. Bryant has the extra point, 43-37 with 2:11 and all 3 timeouts left.
Oh, ooh, 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 ooh. Hey, look. See, Dr. John's got a good game going on here. It's like Green Bay was leading 31-6 at the half, and now it's 43-37. And the Falcons looks like they might go for an onside kick here. This is an exciting game. This is coming off the Sling Box. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, it's amazing how good the Sling Box video looks. That's awesome. This is off this is an iPhone 6 Plus, and it's off the DirecTV receiver, one of the receivers at my house. So that's kind of exciting. Great show tonight. Great having Gary. If you need to follow him on Twitter, if you don't, I think he's like Rick Smith. I would say that the 2 best guys in the Weather Service on Twitter, Gary and Rick, the 2 guys on the show tonight. Very interesting discussion. Great points and everything. So that was good. And what else? Hey, let's see if they get the onside kick. Boy, is this like illegal? I bet you YouTube will yank us off if I show this anymore. They probably great. They'll probably yank us off YouTube for showing that on the screen here. They have amazing algorithms. So they're trying an onside kick that didn't work. Looks like Green Bay might win that game. So Dr. John should be happy. What else? I don't know. I guess that's it. We'll be back next Monday. Kind of a busy time for me. We do our big Christmas push here is for Toys for Tots, and I get into the Toys for Tots live shot mode here over the next few weeks. I'll be live almost every night at some Toys for Tots functions. So it's a busy time of the year. Still doing the school visits and all that, and all that good stuff. Still working here. Still have a job. The jabronis have not fired me. So that's good. But anyway, I got to go. I would stick around and share some boring personal stories, but I've got an early start. I always have an early start, but I got a lot of things to do tonight. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Goodbye and good night and good luck.